Hey, everybody, it's halftime of the NFL game. Gosh, my voice sounds terrible. Cade McFarland alongside the Tulsa World's Mark Cooper. It's a pleasure to have him filling in for Bill Haston. Mark, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic OSU beat writer. Wait, you're from upstate New York, is that right?
Yeah, Albany.
All right, we're going to open up by talking about OU Bama. That game's now less than 2 weeks away, but we are going to get into OSU, and I think there's some interesting stuff there, especially with the early signing day coming on Wednesday. But I like the fact that you're a little bit removed from the OU thing. You obviously watch it, but it's not like you grew up here. I don't think you're influenced by some of the things that some of us are. So I'm interested for kind of more of an outsider's opinion than we usually get with regard to this. So let's roll that beautiful bean footage. We got OU and Bama coming up on December the 29th. As we know, OU's a 2-touchdown underdog in this thing. Very few people are picking OU to win this thing. But I'm hearing more and more optimism regarding their chances of really making this thing a ball game. And I think maybe just because I, for some reason, just naturally play the devil's advocate, I'm now beginning to swing more to the Bama side of things. Just kind of initial impressions regarding from you what you expect to see in this ball game.
Well, I think that's how this always works, right? When there's a month between a game,
you go back and forth.
You
vacillate.
You start by saying, well, Alabama's going to win, and they're going to win big, and then by the end of the month, you're talking yourself into the other side because you've got to find a way to look at it. We were just talking about this. I think Oklahoma is going to be able to score on them, and but I don't know that they're going to be able to score enough. And the thing that I'm interested in is the pressure of being on that OU offense and wondering how many times can you punt or kick a field goal or make a mistake, knowing what's on the other side. Because Tua is the story for Alabama, and Josh Jacobs is a huge story, especially around here. But they're so deep in their playmakers. They've got 5 guys with 30 or more receptions, and those guys, they just have one after another, and they've got a quarterback who can get them the ball this time.
The OU defense is the worst to ever make the college football playoff by a wide margin. I think these guys could stand on their head and play the game of their lives, and Bama might still score 42. But it's going to take that. It's going to take OU's very best offensively. There's really no reason to expect that. But maybe, and you were talking about it a little bit earlier, what if OU does score on its first 3 drives and it becomes apparent to Bama, we're going to have to put up a really big number.
Yeah.
They're not used to that. OU plays in shootouts all the time. Bama doesn't. I'll be interested to see how they might react if they're beginning to feel that kind of game pressure offensively.
Or there's an early turnover, a tip ball, and Oklahoma gets an interception, and they're up 10-0 or even 7-0. How does Alabama react? I think it's going to be really interesting. There is a little bit of precedent for some teams that aren't great defensively. I'd go back to the first year of the playoff. Oregon came out and really dominated Florida State in that semifinal, and they were a really offensively focused team heading in. Not quite the Alabama offense and not quite the OU defense, but there's been times you see a team play maybe the game of their life, as you said it.
And they were the favorite in the title game against Ohio State and ended up coming up short, I think, probably because of that defense. I mean, it's one thing to have to win 2 games with a defense this bad. And it's one thing to have to win 1 game against this Alabama team. But it is just 1 game, 60 minutes, and you've got Kyler Murray on your side. I hear a lot of people in this state, and part of this is what you were just talking about, when you've got this many days to talk yourself into it. A lot of people are going to talk themselves into, I think we got a real shot. Because of that, they had 10 possessions in the second half in overtime last year against Georgia in the Rose Bowl, and they scored 1 touchdown. Like that, it worries. I feel like maybe in this part of the world we're not giving the SEC the respect it is due. The defenses are better there. Like maybe the league, Bob Stoops used the word propaganda years ago. Maybe there's some of that. Maybe they're not quite as good as the hype, but they're still really, really good.
Yeah, and actually, last night the OU Alabama Sugar Bowl was on a replay, and
really?
I actually watched some of it, and it was just kind of funny seeing some of the names because I think that's what sort of drives the narrative here. That
some of that video
that this
right
is the SEC is a little bit overrated. But you mentioned that OU Georgia game and the fact that OU sort of wore down in the second half. It almost reminds me of a first-round NCAA tournament game, and you've got a mid-major who surprises a 3 seed off the bat, and they're up 5 points at the half, and then you get down to the under 8 timeout, and they're down 9, and they're starting to fade. This sort of feels like that sort of game where even if OU's coming out hot early on, this Alabama team is just historically good, at least to this point.
If I had to guess as to how this game would play out, I would definitely guess that OU is going to have some success early, is going to score probably a good number of points in the first half. But I do think it'll be a lot like last year, where eventually it's just that much easier for Alabama to score than it is OU, and they begin to just kind of choke the life out of them. Yeah. One big difference, though, and this was pointed out to me on Twitter today, Baker Mayfield did have the flu last year. It was kind of obvious in that game that it wasn't just the Georgia defense, but Baker wasn't quite right. And Kyler Murray, we assume, is going to be completely healthy, and he also has a level of escapability that transcends what Baker had. It will be interesting to see. I mean, if this turns into, Mike Vick versus Florida State, 20. Are you even old enough to remember that national title game? Almost 20.
Yes, I can remember.
Okay.
Yes.
If it turns into that, where on plays where they have OU beat, and he still escapes for 30 yards, this could be Katie bar the door.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily expect that, but it's certainly possible when you have Kyler Murray. All right, let's talk about Oklahoma State. You cover those guys, and I think there are a couple of interesting things to discuss at this moment in a season that it was interesting if it wasn't, satisfying. It was.
It's always entertaining.
Exactly. With Mike Gundy, it's always entertaining. The early signing day is on Wednesday. And as we stand now, I know Rivals has them number 41 in the country. You said number 45. Was that according to 24/7? Okay. So they're in the 40s again, or let's say at least below 35 again, which is where they've been for most of the last 5 or 6 years. We know that Mike Gundy, who's on the chopper, and there he is, leaving on the chopper, going to visit some kids, doesn't put a lot of stock in the recruiting rankings, or at least that's what he tells us. But we know that Mike Holder maybe puts at least a little bit more stock into it than Mike Gundy does, and a lot of fans do as well. It was one thing to be in the 30s or 40s when you were racking up 10-win seasons. Now at 6-6, how much consternation is there amongst the fan base, you think, that they can't seem to out-recruit the Baylors or TCUs? This year, even Iowa States of the world.
I think there's a little bit, and I think the key to those 10-win seasons when you're not recruiting top 25 classes is a great quarterback and great receiver play. And Oklahoma State had good quarterback play and not great play really other than Tylan Wallace on offense. And so I think you lose, a little bit of that and you sort of show what you are. You're a number 45 team in the country, which might be what OSU was this year. Yeah. But Mike Gundy hasn't really changed the way they've recruited. I look at their quarterback they're going to sign on Wednesday, Brendan Costello. He's out of San Clemente, a quarterback factory of a high school. Sam Darnold went there. But he's a guy, when Oklahoma State offered him, his other offers were Air Force and a bunch of FCS offers. And he wasn't highly regarded. Georgia comes in and offers him later, which maybe kind of validates what OSU sees in him, and he sticks with Oklahoma State. But that seems to be the method that OSU's coaches employ, is they're looking for guys who aren't already being recruited by the big dogs, because I guess they've sort of decided they don't want to spend maybe wasted time going after somebody who they don't feel like they have a real shot at.
Yeah, and that was a change. There was a time when they spent more time on some of those marquee guys and got left at the doorstep, and so Gundy changed things. So are you saying that don't expect this to change anytime soon? This is because of the way Mike Gundy feels Oklahoma State should go about its business recruiting-wise. This is about the level of kid they're going to get, and don't expect them to jump up in the top 25 anytime soon.
There hasn't been any evidence that Oklahoma State's changing what they're doing, and this would have been the year to see it, right? Because the talk of the summer was Mike Holder's comments and his criticisms of how Oklahoma State is recruiting. And football-wise, they've got one 4-star recruit to this class, Grayson Boomer out of Collinsville. Yep. It's 5 4-star recruits according to 24/7 Sports over the last 4 years. The previous 4 years, I think they signed 15 of them. Yeah. And so it's a change that really isn't going anywhere. And they're still able to get the big receivers. That's the one. I think 7 of the 20 guys they've signed who are 4-star guys over the last 8 years are receivers, from Tylan Wallace to Marcel Aitman and some of the other guys. But basically everywhere else, and especially on the offensive line and defensive line, they're not going to get these 4-star guys. They're looking for guys that they can develop, and they're trusting guys like Josh Henson and Joe Bob Clements to do it.
And to be frank, unless there's a confluence of events that's just kind of unreal, and I'm thinking to 2011, and even then, that was a group of recruits that there were more 4-stars there then than there have been since. You're not going to win Big 12 titles. You're definitely not going to win national titles without an abundance of 4- and 5-star kids. So
Yes.
I certainly understand. I got onto Mike Holder during the summer because I was saying, look, 10 wins, 10 wins, 10 wins.
Yes.
Just say thank you. But, and a lot of fans pushed back on that. And they were saying, look, we don't like that Holder said this publicly, but we absolutely agree with what he's saying. And it's easier to agree with when they're sitting at 6-6 and going to the Liberty Bowl, than it was 1 year ago with Mason Rudolph. And you consider the number of times they lost last year as a favorite, 2017 I'm talking about. Yeah. There's some momentum that's maybe a little bit troubling. But Mike Gundy obviously has a pretty impressive track record. All right, so to win this bowl game, they're a pretty big underdog. Yeah. Is the spread 11?
No, it's down, I think, to 8 now.
Oh, okay.
It's
all right,
about,
I probably saw it wrong. What they've been schizophrenic, so we've seen them play well enough to beat a Missouri this year. We've certainly seen them play poorly enough.
Yeah.
What's key in this matchup as you've started to dive into it?
Oklahoma State offensively, they obviously don't have Justice Hill, and they were sort of up and down at the end of the year without him. They didn't run the ball very well against TCU. They did it against West Virginia without him. I think that's going to be a big key, is getting Chuba Hubbard going and taking some of that pressure off Taylor Cornelius. It's kind of the same thing we talked about all year long. Taylor Cornelius is good when he's not being forced into obvious passing situations where he's going to be forced to make some mistakes. And so I think that's going to be really important, is dictating things offensively, because I think Oklahoma State's going to give up big plays to Drew Lock and that Missouri defense, or the Missouri offense, rather.
I can't imagine how they wouldn't.
Yes.
Having seen the Oklahoma State defense all year long and seeing what Locke is capable of, they're going to have to score a lot of points in this thing. It's similar to the OU-Bama thing.
Yeah.
OSU's offense is going to have to be really, really good. Something you uncovered in talking to Gundy this week, more emphasis on special teams in this bowl prep.
Yeah.
What was your takeaway from that?
I think my takeaway is that he's kind of admitting that they haven't had a very good stretch on special teams really the last 2 years. Last year they were not good at all, and this season they blocked a couple kicks against Boise, but other than that, the punting game wasn't great. They haven't gotten much in the return game, and so they're devoting 5 full practices this month to special teams. And he said they're only like hour-long practices. Okay. It's a shorter day, but it's sort of interesting, that he likes that they're playing on the 31st because they've been able to sort of spread out these practices, and he calls it a second spring ball. But just the fact that they're able to devote, basically a third of their practices to special teams tells you how important he thinks it is they get that corrected.
I think most of us expect Spencer Sanders to be the starter next year, and just looking at his high school film, you imagine him and the Yursich offense, the Gundy offense, and you would expect these guys to score a lot of points next year. Tylan Wallace coming back, and really a lot of guys from that offense.
Yeah.
Defensively, the numbers were so bad this year. Where does the rebuild begin? Like, how do they go about getting significantly better on defense next year?
Yeah.
You think?
It's got to be Jim Knowles getting some of his guys who he's recruited in here into the system, guys he can feel comfortable with. I know there's been a lot of criticism of Knowles, and is he the right guy? But I do think he deserves a chance to bring in some of his own pieces. A couple of those guys were in there this year at safety, and Jarek Bernard and Colby Peel, and they struggled at times. There was other times you could sort of see maybe in 2 years they're going to be pretty good players. They're going to have to be better in the secondary. I think AJ Green got a little bit better near the end of the year, but not to the point that you thought he would at the start of the season. I think at the start of the year you thought, he could be an all Big 12 type corner, and he never really got there. But they've got to replace so much on the defensive line that it's hard to get optimistic about this defense, because that was the strength of this team for the last few years. And you lose Brailford and Daniels and Owens, and basically the top 6 defensive linemen on their depth chart are gone. And you're going to be relying on Brock Martin and Brendan Evers and some of these other guys who haven't started a game to put some pressure on the quarterback.
Sure. It's going to be interesting to see. I don't know if crossroads is the right way to put it, but Gundy's been there so long. He's had so much success. But this is an interesting time for Oklahoma State football.
Yeah.
Because, I think Matt Rule, I think Baylor is now well coached. Matt Campbell's not leaving Iowa State maybe as soon as some of us thought. TCU's always going to be well coached. And you have new coaches now in Lubbock and Manhattan, Kansas as well. For OSU to remain where they've been in the Big 12 pecking order, it does feel like they were, even though they defeated Texas, maybe passed by Texas big picture-wise, this season. It's going to be interesting to see how he tries to hold on here in the, is this going to be year 15 for Gundy?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe. This will be a great challenge for him. Well, much more difficult I think, at this stage than it is starting off.
Well, and you mentioned Texas, and I think that's a huge part of it is Oklahoma State has benefited as much as anybody from Texas being down
Yes,
for the
no
last
doubt.
decade.
Sure.
You know, their rise coincided with Texas going through some struggles, and now they're not really. You don't know that you're going to have that. You're going to have a good Texas and a good Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State's got to find a way to compete with those. And you know, yeah, I don't know if we're at the crossroads yet.
Yeah.
But I think this year will be interesting. You know, after
Yeah,
2011.
no doubt.
You wondered how they were going to sustain it post Brandon Whedon, and they had a sort of a 3-year stretch where 2013 they were really good, 12 and 14 were sort of peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
Now they had the Mason Rudolph era of 3 10-win seasons, followed by a 6 and 6. How do they turn 2019 into their 2013?
Sure.
And you know, I think a big part of that is Spencer Sanders, as you mentioned. I think this offense
Yeah,
is
he's gotta
built
be
for somebody
special.
to come in and be good. 4 offensive linemen back, all of their receivers. They just need a quarterback to come in and complete that offense.
Hey, that's good stuff, man. So we're back. I resolved to get done sooner this week, and so we have. I could sit here and talk to Mark for a lot longer because that was good analysis. Thanks so much for joining
absolutely,
us, Mark.
Caden.
Really appreciate it. Is Bill back next week, or are you with us again?
I'm
Not
not sure.
It's up in the air.
Yes.
It'll be somebody from the Tulsa world next week as we grow. We'll be
Figure it out.
1 week away, less
Yeah.
than 1 week away from the college football playoff. For Mark Cooper, Caden McFarland, have a good one, everybody.